Hey everyone. As I'm sure you're all aware, the end of the Windows 10 operating system is coming up very quickly. For those of you who don't know, Windows 10's official support ends on October 14th, 2025. So Windows 10 had pretty much, I think it was around like a 10-year lifespan, which is pretty long. I mean, I think pretty standard for Windows systems, right? Because a lot of people use them. They don't want changes all the time and stuff like that, right? But this Windows 10 having support end in the end of 2025, right? It's gonna be a pretty big deal, and you'll find out why more as I talk in this video now. Windows 10 when it came out, it was pretty interesting, but basically, it was trying to top, I think, Windows 7, in my opinion, because not a lot of people enjoyed 8. But back then, Windows 10 was just seemed like it was trying to top Windows 7, right? It's pretty good. Like, I don't use Windows anymore. I just use Linux, stuff like that. But it was good like in the beginning, and I feel like it just got worse over time, and now we're at the state with 11, and I don't want to even go there. But so essentially, after October 14th, what will happen is you can still use the OS, right? You can turn it on, you can access the internet, you can do everything you used to do, but you just won't be getting extended. You won't get upgrades, you won't get as many security updates, stuff like that, unless you pretty much usually you have to pay, or there's some things I saw where you can have a Microsoft account and like sign in and or use like Microsoft points in order to do that, but it basically kind of blocks you off from getting upgrades. But some people, if they're stubborn, they don't care, they'll continue to use it. I know there's people that have figured out a way to still use Windows 7 to this day, and it's kind of through a little kind of like tinkering and making it work. But essentially, this is a big problem. Windows 10 being out of support because a lot of PCs, that are running Windows 10 right now, automatically basically they fail to meet the minimum criteria for having Windows 11, and that due to the Windows 11 criteria, it's basically it kind of took a lot of people by surprise, right? I know, like basically, I mean, 4 gigs isn't a lot, but if you have a really old laptop that you upgraded from Windows 7 to 10 on, right, and only has a couple gigs RAM, probably maybe 2 if you're really really skimping, you won't be able to upgrade. And I get it, nowadays you should have way better hardware. But if someone has like a device, right, and there's not an inherent problem with it, why should they be forced to upgrade? Some of the other things as well that are more big hits are essentially basically having the trusted platform module and secure boot capable, right? Some of those older PCs, they may not have that. Just back then, I think a lot of them could have had BIOS still, but UEFI, is kind of becoming more the standard, right, and all that stuff. But basically, some of these requirements are really kind of, um, hurting people that have old hardware that's still good. It's like why force, they shouldn't force me to throw away my PC. But the biggest concern with this is that it's going to cause a ton of e-waste. Basically, because people will just end up throwing away their perfectly fine PCs that still could have been used. Could have been if Windows, made the requirements not so strict. But also, I didn't even notice this till researching for this video that there's if you want like a Copilot. I don't know why you'd ever want this, but I don't know, who knows. But if you want like an AI PC, there's a whole different, you have to basically have a NPU, unit, right? Basically that can support those AI and LLMs and all that kind of stuff. So that opens up a new wormhole, but we can just focus on this stuff here. But essentially, it's going to cause a lot of e-waste and really, bothers a lot of people that have, perfectly good hardware because I myself, I don't collect, but I have a couple old computers, it's like these things are fine, like they run perfectly, but it's just, Windows 11 kind of just blocks that, with their system requirements. But essentially, kind of a more like staggering number, right? As you can see, a lot of the market share now. I know this is just like an estimate, but you can kind of take this data however you want it to, right? A lot of people are using Windows, right? So you can imagine, probably a lot of them, Windows 10 mostly, right? If people are keeping up, imagine just how much waste is going to come from that when people throw away their old laptops. And I know Linux is down here; it's getting better, right? They're breaking. I think they broke the 3% cap not too long ago, so that's really good. But a lot of that's going to be wasted, since most of the market is on Windows 10. But like I said, there's no saying like if you really want to upgrade to 11, that's fine. I've seen where there's ways where you can flash an ISO to a USB and you can bypass some of the restrictions and you'll get the upgrades, but it just won't be like fully supported. There's ways you can do it, but on the other hand, if you really like your hardware and you don't want to, you're just done with Windows, right? There's all this other stuff you can do too. And that's where a pretty neat site, I found it's called End of 10, basically is what the site's called. End of10.org, excuse me. And basically it's kind of showcasing like the whole thing around Windows 10 support ending. Everyone wants you to buy a new computer, right, to support those hardware requirements, but it come to find out, right, your old computer is pretty much fine. It still works and you can use it however much you want, but we're basically, I guess not we, I shouldn't say we, they're suggesting that you should just switch to Linux. And literally they offer, kind of like five main like selling point, I guess not selling points, but kind of main points, for creating this initiative, right? You have no new hardware, no licensing costs, enhanced privacy, good for the planet, community and professional support, and better user control. Basically, all with using Linux. And they have a lot of supporters and stuff as well. But essentially, the really cool thing is that they're offering, it's kind of like becoming like an open forum here. People to actually help you, if you're someone that uses Windows, they want to help you migrate over to Linux and not have that PC go to waste. So essentially, it's a really neat initiative. This is amazing. Like I can imagine someone that's maybe a bit older doesn't have the time, might not be able to figure it out. But just because it's the end of Windows 10 soon doesn't mean you have to force yourself to upgrade to 11. I highly suggest that you take the route and try to, try to use one of the easier Linux distros like Mint. You could use Debian, Ubuntu even, whatever you want. Just try to do something easier, and you can still, hold on to that hardware. If it's only a couple of years old, right, still use it. It's perfectly fine. I have plenty of old hardware that runs here, and, I don't care. Like, I don't run Windows because I don't like it anyways, but just wanted to kind of put this message out there, There's definitely paths forward. I've made videos in the past explaining some beginner, Linux distributions, and there's plenty of YouTube videos. You can look up questions. You can even find support here, like people in the forums, right? You can just ask people online, or maybe if you get like a friend that's kind of like a techie like myself, or someone, you could ask them too. And I'm sure, like, if someone asked me to show them, hey, how do I get I guess how do I get Linux on my old computer, I would be the most happiest person ever. I would be so excited to show them. So don't be afraid. If they run Linux and they're Linux users, just ask them, because 9 times out of 10 they'd be delighted to show you, because it's fun teaching someone, and someone's really good at something if they're able to teach it to you well. But unfortunately, that's all the time I have for today. Let me know your guys' thoughts on this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.